Here with How the Great Religions Began by Joseph Gaer. Book 3, The Advance of One God. Part 1, Zoroastrianism, Spark of the Sacred Fire. And remember, there's no such thing as Zoroastrianism. Mazda Yasnahe Zarathustrahe was his real faith. And Part 8 is called The Holy Wars, which, again, projecting a Christian idea. Of course, the Achaemenid rulers. Anyways, Zoroaster had a daughter named Paruksita. Paruchista is probably it. And she was famed as the wisest woman in the kingdom. Paruchista came to the royal palace to see her father, who had been appointed high priest in the court of Balkh. Her wisdom soon gained the admiration of the entire royal family, and the prime minister of Balkh asked her to be his wife. There was only one prime minister in the whole of Balkh, and Paruchista, being a very wise woman, did not refuse him. With the prime minister as his son-in-law, Zoroaster's position in the court was, naturally, well established. One day Zoroaster said to King Vishtaspa, "Your Majesty, if it is true that Ahura Mazda, the wise Lord, created all that is good in the entire world, and that the evil spirit created all the evil in the world, then surely their kingdoms are not only Iran, but the entire world." "That seems true," said the king. "If it is true, then the teachings about the one wise Lord were meant for all men everywhere." "That too sounds true," said the king. "If it is true that the teachings of the wise Lord are meant for all mankind, then it is our duty to spread our teachings everywhere," said Zoroaster. The king agreed with him and ordered missionaries to go out and teach the Avesta all over Iran, and outside of Iran, in all the neighboring kingdoms. Soon, actually it probably took a long time, he gained some following among the poor, and the kings probably came centuries or even thousands of years later as far as accepting. But there was a different thing. It was the kingly version revival. Just like the Parsis had a revival in the 1800s. And anyways, soon the teachings of the Avesta became known all over Iran. They passed into Turan and even in Greece and even in India. These teachings became known. But the number of followers of Zoroaster's teaching outside of Iran was not great. When Zoroaster was 60 years old, he decided to force the neighboring people of Turan to accept Zoroastrianism. This is not in the earlier versions of the story. The Iranians were in debt to the kingdom of Turan, and Zoroaster asked King Vishtaspa to send the following message to Turan. "If you, king of Turan, and your people will not give up your evil ways of idol worship and accept teachings of the wise Lord as written down in the Avesta, as preached by the prophet Zoroaster Spitama, then we will refuse to pay our debt to you." The message made to the king of Turan. The message made the king of Turan very angry. He called together his wise men and asked them what to do. "If, in the name of religion, they can refuse to pay their debts," said one of the wise men, "then in the name of the same religion they may also wish to take away our land and our freedom." They all agreed upon sending to Iran the following reply: "I, king of Turan, and my people, send you this warning. Unless you give up the teachings of Zoroaster and return to the faith of your forefathers, we shall be down upon you with our armies and our spears. before the end of 3 moons. And, so people without the truth faith had the idea of holy war. So war broke out between Iran and Tehran over the religion of Zoroaster, prophet of the one wise Lord. After many fierce battles, the Iranians won great victories over Tehran. Zoroaster, who had caused the war, became hero of his people. His words were law, and his teachings sacred, and the people worshipped him. That was in Iran. Yeah, worship of prophets was never part of the thing, and they would have never accepted that in their life, and actually celebrating his birthday and stuff like this goes quite against the Mazda-Yasnaha definition of the word, but again, things come in, particularly with the priest craft. That was in Iran. In Tehran, they hated him and planned revenge. For 17 years, they plotted against Zoroaster and the Iranians. When they felt strong enough to go to war again, the Tehranians attacked the kingdom of Iran. Shortly afterwards, they besieged the city of Balkh and captured it. Isn't Tehran a language there that wasn't recognized by the Iranian government, and they were kind of trying to prevent it from being taught or something at some point? Afterwards, the city of Balkh and captured it. At the time, the walls of the city fell before the enemy. Zoroaster was in a temple praying for victory of his people in the holy war, which he had started. Again, you say he didn't start that war. That's ridiculous. As he knelt before the sacred fire, a Turanian soldier rushed into the temple and stabbed the old prophet in the back. So died Zoroaster, prophet of the one wise Lord. And part 9, the fire that always burns. Now, around 570 of the Common Era, one of the remaining fires, at least one of them, for some reason the fire went out. It said, King Vishtaspa made a vow to avenge the death of the slain prophet. He organized all his forces and renewed his attacks upon the Turanians until they were defeated. Not until they promised to accept Zoroastrianism as their religion did King Vishtaspa make peace with his neighbors. As soon as the war was over, the king sent out missionaries to other lands to spread the teachings of Zoroastrianism. With time, the teachings of Zoroaster slowly changed. When Zoroaster had been asked whether the wise Lord was alone in his work of good in this world, he answered that the wise Lord had the heavenly assistants called angels, Ahuras, Yazatas, to do his bidding. The most important of these angels, he said, were 6: good mind, piety; good order, well-being; wisdom, immortality. And the Yazidi faith of the people from about 30,000 years ago, the evidence seems to show, heavily influenced what was to come next of what people thought Zoroastrianism was. But from the names of these angels, we can easily understand that Zoroaster did not mean the angels of the wise Lord were actual angels with wings, harps, and halos as we sometimes see in pictures. What Zoroaster meant was that these are the various characteristics of the wise Lord. And again, there was the actual belief in unfallen angels, malak, light beings, whatever you call them, but they weren't intermediaries in that mythology. Just as, for instance, we say that Abraham Lincoln had a love of justice, that he had wisdom, and that he had a good mind, that he had a love for his country and his people. By that, we do not mean that he had these things in his trunk or that they were servants in his house. What we mean is that they were part of his character. They were his characteristics. In the same way, Zoroaster meant that the good mind, good order, wisdom, piety, well-being, and immortality were characteristics of the wise Lord of the world. But the priest and the people of Iran had been idol worshippers. Though they accepted the teachings of Zoroaster, they still had the minds of idol worshippers. When Zoroaster told them about the characteristics of the wise Lord, they imagined them as evil. They imagined them as real angels that flew like a flock of white birds, blowing golden horns and singing hymns. Limits were ascribed later, but let's not exaggerate that position. Before very long, they named thousands of white angels who live in heaven above, and 99,999 black demons who help the evil spirit in the hell below. In that way, they did just what Zoroaster did not want them to do. They worshipped the old idols, only they gave them new names. Now, actually, idol worship wasn't... I don't think idol worship is present in the Achaemenid period, but they did switch to worshipping everything but the fire and the elements themselves. There were angels for this, that, and the other. That way they did what Zoroaster did not want them to do. They worshipped the old idols, and only they gave them new names. Zoroaster also believed that the world would come to an end in his own day, but after his death, the Zoroastrian priest told their followers that the wise Lord created the world in 6 periods of 2 months each, and that the world would last 1,000 years for each month of creation. Zoroaster, they said, was born at the end of 9,000 years after creation. After 3,000 years after his death, a son of Zoroaster would appear on earth. This son of Zoroaster would be the Seyoshant, the Messiah, the Savior of mankind. The beliefs and teachings of Zoroaster were changed by his followers. Now, if it was 4,000 years ago, I guess Muhammad ibn Abdullah was the closest to that, but it's definitely not Jesus, and it definitely was not the sort of Messiah that the Christians believe in. It was more of a literal Messiah that they expected. But the most important teachings of the prophet of the one wise Lord remained at the foundation of their religion to this day. Zoroaster was the first religious leader in the world to teach the belief in an abstract God, a God one could not touch or hear or smell or see. That God was Ahura Mazda, the one wise Lord who created all that was good in the world, and whom we know only through his works. Zoroaster also taught that when a man does good, not only is the deed recorded in the book of life, and the doer rewarded, but the doer of good also adds to the good of the world. Therefore, as Zoroaster preached, it is the duty of man to do good, not only for the reward one gets, but also because in doing good, people add to the good of the world and help Ahura Mazda win his battle with Engra Manu, the evil spirit. I don't think that was... but in the Baha'i faith, they picked up that, well, you're helping God. Well, if God is God, then, God always wins anyways. So, and it's only for ourselves that we're fighting the battle for ourselves to do to have the good thought, the good word, and the good deed. But anyways, the doer of evil is in league with the evil spirit, but the doer of good fights the battles of the wise Lord. Zoroaster urges followers to fight the battles of the Lord through purity of thought, word, and deed, cleanliness, charity of heart, kindness to useful animals, doing profitable work, and helping people who cannot afford it to receive a good education. They who follow these teachings can be said to be followers in the ways of the one wise Lord. Section 10, Zoroastrianism today. Nearly 300 years after Zoroaster died, Alexander the Great, king of Macedonia, conquered Persia. He destroyed the Avesta, it is told, and in the place of Zoroastrianism set up the religion of the Greeks of that day. So the Parthians had kind of mixed religion. But the people of Persia did not wish to give up their religion and secretly taught it to their children. When the Persians became independent of foreign rule about 500 years later, they restored the teachings of Zoroaster. They gathered into books the parts of the old Avesta that had been saved and remembered by the people. Much of the old Avesta was lost, but the newly gathered Avesta began to spread over to Persia, and new fire temples were built. In these temples, a fire was kept burning all the time, as a symbol of the one wise Lord who lives forever. About 400 years later, the Arabs conquered Persia, and with them they brought a new religion that they forced upon the people at the point of the sword. Anyone who refused to accept the religion was put to death. May the curse of God be upon those who fight to force conversion. That's what Prophet Muhammad said, and there's very little that actually happened in Persia. There's a handful of areas, and from there, some of the extremisms of Shiism that one hears about, even to the point of the Shia not being Muslim. This originates from there. The hidden imam, a more general belief and stuff like that, also kind of came from there. But anyways, there were many in Iran who would rather die than accept a new religion they did not believe in. Originally, the thing was one area, I don't remember, one of the, still remains a problem area today, the Zoroastrian people, for the most part, there was a large persecution. They're telling us to start to worship the angels and stuff like this. We can't have these people, it threatened their priesthood. Nowadays, the priesthood's poor. But one of the areas where the injustice was done, I think like 20,000 people or something, it was horrible. They said, hey, we're not ready to accept your prophet. We'll be at peace with you, which, therefore there was no reason to go to war with them. The areas where the persecution, different story. There are many in Iran who would rather die than accept a new religion they did not believe in. There were some who accepted the new religion rather than die, and others ran away to lands where they were permitted to practice their religion as they pleased. Today, there are few Zoroastrians left in Persia. Most of the Zoroastrians live in India, the country they ran away to over 1,300 years ago. Now, yeah, that's an exaggeration, and the Parsi community is not as much as something from birth as people think. Genetic studies don't seem to point that out, and the historical evidence, there's like huge gaps. Like 800 years, I think, in some parts, what people think. Why did nobody know they existed until, 800 years later? Some of the areas they said, oh, we've been here for the longest time. But there's a lot of false history going around in the history of priest-run religions. Though these Zoroastrians, called Parsis, believe that their religion is the best in the world, they did not and do not teach it to the Hindus. Not only that, they even prohibit anyone from becoming Zoroastrian who is not one by birth. Now, born right the first time, you don't need to become born again. If you degrade, and then you need to be born again per se, but any faith that is not a natural religion that you can be, at least in principle, by birth, there's a problem there. Particularly if they don't accept you to return, if you weren't raised as of that faith. The Parsis realized that the best and most educated Hindus who belonged to the high caste would not give up Hinduism and join any other religion. The only Hindus who would join a new religion would be the outcasts who would try to find a new religion teachings that would make them feel just as good as their superiors. And the Parsis realized that if they permitted the most ignorant people of India to join the religion, Zoroastrianism might soon sink into idol worship, and they decided that it was better to have just a few followers worthy of the faith rather than have many unworthy. Today, there are only about 100,000 Zoroastrians in the world, yet this religion, small as it is and the number of its followers is very important for its influence on other religions, as soon as we shall soon see. And, that comes to the end of this section, doesn't it? Okay, yeah, it does. But it's possible that just like the Judaism that propped up in appearance of Christian missionaries, that you had the same phenomenon going on in Persia. With the Parsis. And the emergence of the thought that we don't want anybody to convert and people have to be born in and all that stuff. But anyways, so how do you think this religion began?